Sydney, are we clear to proceed?
Just one more moment. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to get the stream link. It's recording, but the stream link is not started yet. So just one moment, please. Okay, we're live.
Good, thank you very much, Sydney. I just got the notice that it's live stream, so we should be good. All right. I've called the meeting to order. The second topic on the agenda is declaration of pecuniary interest. Any member wish to make a declaration? No. Very good. Thank you very much. Item number 3 is adoption of the agenda. You've all seen the agenda is circulated. Are there any questions about any part of the agenda? Everyone's good with that. I will be raising an item under new business. So I just want to make members aware of that. It'll just be a short comment that I'll make at the end. So I'd like you to be aware of that. And it's not shown on the agenda, but I'm going to put it on, please, if that's all right. So does anyone else have any comments on the agenda? Okay, I have a motion here. I will need a mover and seconder for it. Reads, be it resolved that the planning committee adopts the agenda of January 28th, 2022 as circulated. Could I please have a mover? It's moved by Armin, seconded by.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Jack. All in favor? Carried. Let's move on to it. Item number 4 then. Item A is adoption of the November 22nd, 2022 minutes. And I have them, and I think that people are familiar with them. Are there any questions, notes, errors, or omissions from the minutes as circulated? Armin, did you have your hand up? The floor is yours. Turn on your mic, please, sir.
Sorry. Yeah, I don't know if it's just me, but the information in those minutes seems pretty abbreviated. If I hadn't attended the meeting, I might be hard pressed to understand what was actually happening there. So I don't know if anybody else wants a higher level of detail, but there were some discussions that I don't think were recorded in the minutes. It seems a bit abbreviated to me. So. And it's not, I don't intend it as a criticism. I just want to find out what level of documentation is everybody else expecting from these meetings.
Well, I have to apologize. I was unable to attend. So I'm a little bit behind the 8 ball on here, but as I think you know, my normal practice has been to try and make sure that we get enough detail, and sometimes it's a little hard electronically. It's much better when we used to meet and you could I could lean over to the minute taker and say, okay, have you got the gist of this? Sydney's doing a great job trying to capture stuff, but I guess some stuff perhaps got missed there. And I do think that what's instructive here is the comments that Karen has made, that what you want to be able to do is you want to be able to look at that meeting and reflect back and understand what recommendations went to council, or what the gist of the discussion behind the recommendation was. And she just said that 20 minutes ago. So I think that's helpful, and we can try and improve on that. But Armin, do you have just in terms of these minutes, because I gather there's a bit of a concern, and I'm not going to read the motion to adopt them just yet until we have this conversation. Is there some specific item, or is there a paragraph that you would suggest as an amendment or an addition to them? How would you like to proceed?
Thanks, Michael. I would have to go back on my notes and so on, but I know we had some pretty comprehensive discussions on a number of things, and they just don't seem to be reflected there. That's all I'm saying. So I think if we defer to Karen's comments on Karen Way's comments on what should be included in those minutes, then I'll be happy with that.
Okay, so you'll be okay if we strive for a little bit more detail going forward, if there's something.
Yes. Thank you.
And I would ask that all of us have a role to play in this when they're distributed and when they come out. You know, there's certainly no reason why we can't, you know, share some commentary amongst us that, hey, did we miss this, or what happened to that? And that's very helpful. And I would also suggest as a reminder that if there are some concerns or comments with the minutes, I know that we share emails amongst ourselves saying we're going to be at the meeting, or we'd like to discuss this. I would continue to urge us to use that as to put something in writing, because it's much easier to have something in front of you and just say, yep, there was a couple of sentences more that we should have put in here. So thank you for raising that, Harmon, and I'll try and help a little bit more on things as we go through this. Are there other comments on the minutes? Alan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, one of the things that I think might be helpful, and Karen, if you're still there, I see your image or your picture, your frame, but not you. But it would be helpful if we could get some clarity from staff on the strategies for minute taking, because from a council standpoint, when we shifted to video recording of the meetings, we seemed, I think, to put less focus on the textual transcription of the meeting and rely on the video capture of the meetings to be more of the record. Karen, could you comment on that?
I don't think that had anything to do with switching to live streaming. I think maybe it's that I, as a clerk, was only here for a few months prior to us having to go to electronic meetings, and maybe that was a style difference between clerks. I do think it's more important to capture the detail that we're really wanting and the direction to be given within the recommendations and resolutions, as opposed to the minutes themselves. The Municipal Act clearly states that we are to record minutes without note or comment. So there could be lots of dialogue and discussion, but at the end of the day, the decision is based off that resolution. So perhaps maybe moving forward, we need to beef up or make those more detailed, or be clearly, you know, in some cases, you know, here's the draft policy. Yes, we support the draft policy. That one obviously is quite simple because there's a supporting document. But I think perhaps moving forward, it's kind of hard to, you know, go backwards. I'm sure we all wish we could go back in time and change things. But I think moving forward, the best practice would be to make sure that our resolutions in the moment, and even if it means taking the time to put them up on the screen or draft through them a bit more, that would be the best practice moving forward.
I guess what I was getting at is the, and I think you're sort of agreeing with this, and that is that the minutes tend to be brief and more kind of milestone related, whereas the video is really the capture of the discussions that have taken place in the meeting and how we got to those milestones. And I know there used to be an attempt in minute taking to capture not only the discussion, but also the milestones. And my understanding is, certainly from a council standpoint, that it's the video that is capturing the discussions, and that you know, the minutes would be more the milestones.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Alan. I guess if ever a day comes when we shut the video down and get back face to face with stuff, we'll have to revisit how we've got enough information. But that's helpful, and it is good that it's being recorded. I think it always helps that you've got a little bit of a written record too. So thanks for raising that. Beth, you had a comment?
Sorry, yes. Just as it relates to the recorded minutes, I noticed there are generalizations in terms of the committee said this or the committee said that. And clearly in the last meeting, we had a good dialogue about the appropriateness of moving forward with public meetings, or this whole process for the waterfront policy review during the winter months and holding public meeting in the spring. And as a coastal association, certainly I expressed the concern on behalf of our association, and I believe it's echoed in probably Go Home, and Michael, you weren't at the last meeting, and probably in Wawatesi, if you engaged in some discussions with them, is that really they're not engaged right now in planning related matters in a place where they're not at today. And just for instance, and I raised this at the last meeting, and Michael, your association may be the same, is that there's only so many notifications that go out to members. I know our CCA is just sending out a notice right now of upcoming things to prepare for the spring. There's been no mention to our association president about the waterfront policy area review. And we won't have another, they won't have another mailing out to their association until spring, when it's, you know, getting the kids in line for hopefully a recreation program this summer. So I think the association members or the coastal members of this township really are not plugged in right now to what's going on. They're probably away and just absent out of mind. So I would be interested, Michael, in what your views would be too. But for now, the committee, the minutes are reflected saying we had concerns, but then the committee said, let's go ahead and have a public meeting in the spring. So there's a conflict alone right in the meeting minutes. So I just raised that, and I continue to have the same concerns.
Okay, I'll deal with a piece of it, and then I'll turn it over to our director of planning. But I want to explain a little bit of logistics here so that all members understand that. First of all, I think the discussion that you're raising, Beth, is relative to the minutes and something that got said or didn't get said and get recorded. And I think we're pretty clear on how we're going to proceed going forward with that. So the first thing, or one of the things I'd like to deal with before I turn it over to the director of planning is I want to get us through a resolution to adopt the minutes, and we have an understanding, and it's all been recorded, that they'll be more detailed in future. Second item, and this is what I want to make you aware of, is as we've discussed before in advance of meetings, it has always been my approach as your chair to find an opportunity to sit down and have a discussion of the upcoming agenda with the consultant and with the director of planning or whatever staff are appropriate, should that be necessary. Because remember, we've all agreed that we were going to go to monthly meetings. Council's approved that, and we were going to do 2 topics a meeting to try and get through and get the best possible advice there. So I just want you to know that relative to your concerns about stakeholders, consultation, notices, and that, I've had a conversation, and that's what the agenda topic this week is. And I'm going to turn it over to the director of planning in a minute, and he's going to walk us through that. So I just want you to be aware of that. So there'll be ample opportunity for discussion around your concern. And you wouldn't have known that, except I hope all of you know that I do try sort of a week or so in advance to make sure that I'm up on what the agenda topic is and that it's going to work. And I asked the director of planning, and I've asked the consultant, do you have slides? How will it work? Sort of thing. Just like I did Karen, how much time do you need? I sent an email to Cindy, for example, a month ago when that came out. I said, hey, can we get the training? Can we do it? So I hope that you would a little bit. I mean, I don't make it all the time, but I try and make sure that the agenda is worked through and is helpful and will be meaningful to all of you. So Beth, just so you know, like I'm sure your question is going to be answered in a few minutes when we get into that topic. I don't know, Dr. Aspila, do you want to say something about that now, or do you want me to just introduce you when the topic comes up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think you covered some of the points I wanted to raise, so if we can just get on with our exercise, that'd be wonderful.
Okay, let's Beth and Alan and Armin, who have raised some concerns around our minutes. I think we've got them solved. I'm going to ask all of us to pay attention, as I have before, and use our communication means if there's something missing in future meetings. We'll deal with the stuff relative to stakeholders shortly. I don't think I'm going to try and amend a resolution. I'm just going to read this and see if I can get a mover and seconder. Be it resolved that Planning Committee approves the minutes of the November 22nd, 2022 meeting as circulated. Would I get a mover and a seconder for that, or do you wish to propose an amendment to that? Bill, are you moving it? A nod of the head's good. You're there. There
Yeah,
we go.
sorry. Yes, I would move it.
Okay, do I have a seconder for approval of the minutes as circulated? Armin, you've seconded. Show of hands, all in favor, please. Carried. Okay, now we're going to move on to topic number 5. And this is the one where I think Beth and others may have some concerns. We're all anxious to hear about how we're going to deal with stakeholders and the timing of the year and notifications, et cetera. I have, as I said, had a conversation and asked that the Director of Planning lead us through this, and I hope that it's a good discussion and that we're able to give good advice to him. So the floor is yours, Dr. Aspila. I'll turn it over to you and or Jason, but I think you're going to walk us through it, right?
Thank you, Chair Williams. So the purpose of our discussion today is going to be around identifying stakeholder issues in stakeholder mapping exercise. So I'm going to take a step back and provide a brief overview of what was approved at Council. So you may recall back in April of 2021, there was a motion that was brought forward by Councillor Hazelton that was in the report that was provided to Council in the January meeting that asked us to prepare a draft terms of reference for approval. In January at Planning Council, that was approved. We fulfilled the direction of Council. There's to determine the defined areas within the municipality where the study is appropriate, use appropriate supporting consulting expertise, and we address the inclusion of stakeholder consultation, including the cottage associations and other community groups that have been proactively involved in the planning process in the township. So that part's complete. It's been approved. There's a terms of reference in place. The next step for the waterfront policy review, based on the direction we received from Council back in April 2021, is to prepare an accompanying report with the recommendations on the advisability of carrying out such a study, i.e. the waterfront policy review, and the associated timelines. So we'll be bringing a report back to Planning Council with our recommendations on what's going to be required to do so. Before we do that, today we need to go through a stakeholder mapping exercise with the Planning Advisory Committee and obtain your input on who you think the key stakeholders are. We don't need to get into all of the details. That'll be done as part of the policy review study, but we want to identify them. So Jason and I will be leading a discussion today, identifying matters that we'd like input on from the committee. And I guess there's 3 big areas that we want to focus your input for us on. And those are, how could a particular stakeholder influence the study? And when I say influence, I mean the entire broad spectrum of influence. What is their level of concern or desire to be involved in the study? And the third question that I have, and we can go back and discuss these as necessary, why should a particular stakeholder be involved in the waterfront policy review? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jason if he has anything to add with respect to that and the process that we're going to go through today. So Jason.
Thank you, Dr. Aspila. No, nothing to add from my perspective. I think you've covered the waterfront, if I could use the pun, if you will. So thank you.
Okay, so on that note, I'd like to open it up to the committee, and I'd like your input on various types of stakeholders that we need to include. I know there was some preliminary discussion at the last meeting in November, but now we have about 50 minutes or so to have further discussion, and I'd like to open up the floor right now.
Thank you, Doctor. We will go around and get get the various committee members to give you some advice on it. As a reminder, the 3 questions that you've posed to us is how could stakeholders influence the study? What do you think their level of concern or desire would be to be involved in the study? And why should a particular stakeholder or group be involved? So I'll just go around as people wish to input. Let's get everybody's opinion. We'll do a first round of comments, please. And if anybody wants to start, just put up your hand and I'll recognize you. And I'm the chair, I got to go last. So I'm going to put my hand up, but I'm not going to do it till the end. Dr. Aspila.
And if I'll add, I'll be typing away, taking details down with respect to this for our input in the study that will be, or the report we'll be bringing to council in the future. Thanks.
Oh, good. We'll compare your note taking to Sydney's and then we'll see who we're going to score higher. That's good. Okay, enough. Who wants to start? This is unbelievable. Come on. I've never had a session with you folks that there aren't like 5 hands firing up on this. We're talking about waterfront policies, advice to council. Who are we going to talk to? And get a cup of coffee. Get a grip, team. Let's go. Beth, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say obviously the cottage associations would want involvement and participation in a process that is going through a review of our current waterfront policies. So that would be potentially Honey Harbor, Go Home, Wawatasi, all of the coastal communities up and down the shore. Jack, maybe Go Home Lake as well. You've got your own association, 6 Mile Lake. So you've got the full list of associations. Certainly those that have their own community plans that they have developed and have different aspirations, because every coastal or inland situation is quite different. So I think it's important that the associations be involved. On the global scale, there's the Georgian Bay Association, and they have a land use policy review committee. I think that's the name of it. Somebody could correct me, but for sure, GBA is getting more engaged right now on policy related matters of our township, and rightly so. So the Georgian Bay Association, maybe Georgian Bay Forever when it comes to review of environmental policies, for instance, in terms of protection of wetlands, species at risk, water quality, all of those things. Eastern Georgian Bay Protective Society. Is that, sorry, Dr. Aspila has his hand up. Do you have all those on your list already?
So if I may, Member Halpenny, if you could offer some insight into how do you think these organizations would play a role in influencing the study? And going back to the 3 questions that I posed. So we can assemble a list, and we are starting to assemble a list. But I'm looking for more input. How do you think they're going to influence the study? How concerned are they? What we don't need to go into the specific details. What's their desire to participate in the study, and why do you think they should be involved?
Well, the desire to participate in the study is to ensure the protection of sensitive coastal wetlands, if it's related to, for instance, a dock in an FH1 or a provincially significant wetland area. There are many reasons why those associations would want to get involved, even as it relates to definitions, Dr. Aspila, because we have been through, and perhaps you're aware already from view of OMD decisions, the importance of defining what a waterfront lot is, the importance of defining what navigable waterway is, because development along the coast particularly doesn't relate to inland, but development along the coast relies on your ability to get to a lot, to develop, to construct, to maintain a septic system. So those associations have been through their own individual examples, applications, heartaches, things that were approved or not approved, to understand some of the issues with the existing policies and how they potentially could be corrected in the future. Just as a couple examples.
Thank you, Beth. I want to raise my hand, but I can't figure out where the thing is on my screen. And I'm going to violate my previous comment that I said I want to go around the table first. I want to give the director of planning and the consultant a little bit of background here that will help answer those 3 questions. And I do it in mind of seeing my colleagues, Jack, Armin, and Beth, who have been with me since sort of day one when we first approached council and asked to be involved in this stuff. So it's a little bit of a historical perspective here, Dr. Aspila. These stakeholders who you have, the cottage associations that Beth has named, the GBA, et cetera, they have spent untold hours of volunteer time as well as paid time to develop what was at the time called the Waterfront Community Plans. This happened over a period of years. Every community is different, and I think that we're all hopeful that at some point in time we may be able to give Jason and you a tour of the wonderful areas that we have relative to the township. But we're not going to do it now. It's freezing cold. We're going to wait till we get some decent weather. I'd like you to be aware when Beth or our other members throw out names like Wawatasi, the Madawaska Club of Go Home Bay, the Honey Harbor Association. Everyone knows them in the township in name, but what may have been forgotten is many years ago, those associations spent thousands of dollars on planning consultants, on volunteer time to be able to come up with the particular policies that they wanted to govern in their communities. And those policies, I think you will find them stand up and fiercely defend. Many of those communities through the years have revisited them. I know my community has looked at some of them and has needed to work with the township to make changes where appropriate. Some communities have realized that the definitions aren't as clear as they need to be, that there are some problems and issues that need to be dealt with, and they're willing to do that. And so I think, you know, if I could just for a moment share that, that's why we need to be talking to these people, to these communities, to these associations. You have a representation of us here. I like to think, for example, in my situation, that I do have a fair bit of knowledge, you know, coming out of the channel at Cognisheen and moving right up to Wawatasi at Big David Bay. That's where I live. That's where I recreate. That area, as Armin has said many times and others, is totally different from Honey Harbor or some of the other places. And therefore we have special policies. And Wawatasi and Go Home are frequently tended to be lumped together because it's more of a remote wilderness thing. So I just wanted you to be aware of that when you ask us the question about a level of concern or desire to be involved, I can tell you that my own community will put their hand up and will do anything possible to be involved and would signal to you that we have a very strong desire. It's not that there aren't things that should be clarified or redefined or changed. It's not that, you know, status quo, but it's we want to get it right. And we want to help council get it right. And we want you as the director of planning and Jason as the consultant and the elected council members and mayor to understand the unique nature of each of the communities that's out there. So that's what I would put forward kind of on behalf of all of us. And I only share that. I'm sorry for taking up a little bit of time because Jack and Harmon and Beth and I were in it at the ground level. You know, we were in it debating that. And we all had discussions on should these things go in an official plan? Should they be in a comprehensive zoning bylaw? And we all have planning backgrounds, just like you. And we know that they got in places where, you know, in a perfect world, we'd put them in a different place. And that'll come in the future. If this waterfront policy review leads to updating the OP, fixing comprehensive, doing some changes to comprehensive zoning bylaw, so be it. But your comment about why should a particular, number 3, why should a particular stakeholder be involved? I would suggest that it is not very good territory for a consultative municipality with the special features that ours has to not involve each and every one of those groups that worked at the stakeholder community level and did those community plans, or whatever we're calling them now. Just that's a little bit of the background. That's why there's 4 of us here, and there's more than 4 of us who put our hands up and said we'd like to help you and give some advice to council. But I just wanted to share that, because I don't think we need 10 people to repeat, you must talk to this association, because I think council understands that, and I'm sure both you and Jason do. But I just wanted to give you that perspective, that it wasn't willy-nilly. It wasn't somebody who just asked, okay, could we figure out what we're doing with a dock or a deck? It was years of hard work and money to get those waterfront community plans where they were and to get them into the official plan. And I think that you will have much stronger support for a waterfront review if you are open, engaged, and quite consultative with all of them, remembering the background on how they got there. I'll be quiet. I wasn't supposed to do that, but I wanted the history of it. And I'd look to the other members to tell me if I got it right or if you've got stuff. Alan, you're kind of nodding, so I think.
And I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chair, for those comments. It is very helpful for us, and we do recognize that there is uniqueness to many of these communities, and we look forward to hopefully getting to these communities to see them in more detail, because we've heard wonderful history of community engagement from these communities over the last several decades, and that is very positive. I want to emphasize the question that the third question I asked: why should they be involved? And I want to clarify for the committee, that's not intended as a negative. I'm not asking why they shouldn't be. I'm looking for the positives as to what they're going to bring to the table for this study. We're a consultative community, and I'm just looking for additional background on that from the committee. Thank you.
Okay, we'll help you with that, Doctor, in just one sec. Alan, you had your hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond a little bit to Dr. Aspila regarding some of these things. And I'm not sure this forum is really the right forum for all the detailed information. I think it's more notional and kind of a high level stuff. But we heard from Beth some associations like the Georgian Bay Association, the Georgian Bay Association's Coastal Advisory Committee, GBF, the Eastern Georgian Bay Protective Society, also throw in the Georgian Bay Great Lakes Foundation. I mean, one of the things that's interesting about each and every one of these organizations is that they live and breathe in our community. They study the issues that relate to our residents, and they try to bring forward policies that support the interests of the residents. And to some degree, they are more connected to the residents than, say, a councillor might be or others. And additionally, they spend a lot of money, as Michael has said, they spend a lot of money on working through programs to support the communities and support the environmental strategy, which, by the way, as you know, is the #1 strategy of the township. And so, in some respects, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record to you and others on staff, but Ward 4 is a little bit different than the other wards, where you have cottage associations that are broadly representing the community. Honey Harbor, as we've already heard, is a very different kind of community compared to the other communities up and down the shoreline. It's very fragmented. We have a lot of road associations in our community that will speak separately and independently of, say, the Honey Harbor Association. We have groups in South Honey Harbor that are not actively involved with the Honey Harbor Association. So what we need to understand is that the leveraging of these other groups, where they act on behalf of the residents at large, and in specific areas to deal with a lot of the challenges that we've had in the community. They're very well connected. They're highly motivated. And why should we invite them? It's because they are motivated to help our residents accomplish the strategies that our township have set out, which is number one, the environment. So I could go on and on and on, but I won't. I'll stop there. But I'd certainly love to and welcome the opportunity to help you learn more about these organizations as we go forward.
Thank you very much, Al. That's helpful. Armin, you have a comment. Turn your mic on, sir.
Sorry about that. I support everything that you said, Michael. I thought it was a very good representation and very historically accurate on all the work that has gone into it by all of the stakeholders and especially the cottage association groups and so on. The part that's a little bit unrepresented in some of those, and some of it's their own fault for not joining one of the respective associations, but the local community are somewhat underrepresented in some of these statements. And so I would like to suggest that I don't know what the mandate of the community advisory group, whether it's limited to the waterfront development that was happening at the Delawana, or I believe they were all called in to have an opinion on some other things that were relevant. But it might be an idea to include them if it's appropriate. And then also the Chamber of Commerce. I think the local Chamber of Commerce would be, out of courtesy, I think it would be a good idea to include them in any correspondence and studies that might be happening, so that another perspective might be offered by some of the people that are busy working and haven't attended some of the other meetings.
Okay, good. Thank you very, very much for that. That's helpful, because I think you're raising a good point about a segment that may not have had the same level of consultation or discussion that some of us have had. Bill, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I think, Councillor Hazelton and yourself, Mr. Chair, have covered, the basics with respect to, the various lake associations. They're all pretty dedicated, highly involved. I just want to reiterate, with respect to 6 Mile Lake, for example, there's 2 associations. There's a long-standing 6 Mile Lake Cottagers Association, and more recently the 6 Mile Lake Ratepayers Association, which have somewhat competing views on some of the policies, pertaining to Georgian Bay in general, but also specifically the 6 Mile Lake policies. And those people are pretty involved and dedicated with respect to those issues. And I think, primarily the value or how they'll influence the study is they have an intimate knowledge of policies, how they've been used, a lot of ideas on, situations where they think the policies are not sufficiently well worded, that they're doing what they're intended to do. So, I think getting all of that information, identifying the issues, identifying those policy, if you want to call them sort of different interpretations on key policies, so that we make sure that we can sort of screen all those and identify the ones that properly can be addressed in this study. And, I think the other people have referred to the level of concern. A fundamental purpose for these organizations is within their areas to, to facilitate those discussions within their areas. And so, there is a high level of concern. That's sort of what a substantial part of why they exist in the first place. I think, why be involved? I think I said it helps to define the key issues, the conflicts, the areas that need clarification. And, you know, on a more practical basis, if you don't involve them, you open yourself to criticism if you know, if you don't flag all the appropriate things and you haven't consulted with them, you put yourself behind the eight ball pretty quickly in the study. Anyway, that's my view on that.
Thank you very much, Bill. Well said. And I think as I was listening to you, it's really important to recognize, as we have even amongst ourselves, that there are some divergent opinions and views, and it's important to get all of them out on the table as you go through the waterfront policy review. So the examples you've given, you know, of basically the two groups out there are great examples, and they're going to be needed to be dealt with as we go through this whole exercise. So thank you for sharing that, Bill.
Yeah, and just one further point I guess I meant to cover that I maybe didn't is, you know, I think a lot of these associations sort of, you know, issues arise, they get down into the weeds and the details. They're in the trees, but I think this study has an opportunity to sort of broaden things out, you know, help everybody by broadening things out and saying, okay, well, you know, this disagreement about this definition, you know, what does that arise from? Is it because we have a fundamental difference at a very high policy level about what it is that we're actually trying to achieve? You know, sort of the conflict between protecting the environment, giving people the freedom to do what they want to do with their properties, those kind of things, you know. What was the original intent of that policy, you know, with those dichotomies, if you want, you know, what was it we were trying to do? And, you know, will that help sort out when we get down to the detail level? So, you know, the study seems to be an opportunity to raise the level a bit and focus on where we started from, what we're trying to achieve, and maybe that will help a lot of these associations with some of the detail conflicts that they might have. Anyway, thank you.
Good point. Jason, you have your hand up. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's how I lower my hand. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask, so Armin had mentioned the Chamber of Commerce, and typically when we're looking at an exercise like this, and I appreciate the discussion around, you know, Georgian Bay being a community of communities coming from Sudbury, which is a community of 13 or 14 different communities. I sort of certainly understand that concept, and will obviously be consulting with the community and the cottage associations as well, and as well as the environmental organizations. I think that relate to Georgian Bay. I think those are very good suggestions. But typically when we're doing a stakeholder mapping exercise like this, we're also sort of looking at, we look, you know, the social dimension, we look at the environmental dimension, we look at sort of the economic dimension, and Armin has mentioned sort of the chamber, but I'm curious to understand more around home builders would be my first question. And then I'm curious to hear from the committee, I think Dr. Aspila is, as well, as we sort of pull up a little bit just to sort of build on the point, and we look at where we are within the province, in particular our location relative to the Bay and the Great Lakes. We want to make sure that we're getting sort of the right perspective on stakeholders in that realm as well. So who are we consulting with from the federal government, from the provincial government? Are we consulting with the International Joint Commission on Water Levels, for example? Are we talking to Canadian Hydrological Services to talk about changing water levels? Is there a broader group of stakeholders that we need to be considering, Mr. Chair? So just some thoughts that are going through my head as I'm listening to the conversation.
Armin, do you want to respond to the Chamber of Commerce and building piece?
Yeah. At the moment, we don't have a home builders association as such, and you know, there's a provincial one which some of us belong to, but in general, the local builders who, you know, face the unique challenges of working out in the wilds of Georgian Bay coastline and so forth, we don't really have an you know, recognized group as such. But you know, I certainly speak with a number of people from Go Home Bay, and you know, people that are designing and building things similar to what we do. And so I think probably the time has come to organize a bit of a group like that in our defense. And in a lot of cases, we're supportive of all of the, or most of what's been already contemplated in the provisions that we have in the bylaws and official plans and so forth. But clearly there are challenges as identified in the last meeting on the interpretation and the township's policy as opposed to the hard provisions that are in those documents. But the Chamber of Commerce does include many of the local builders. So I think in the absence of a more formal group that represents builders, that's probably the next best thing. I'm not sure if I answered all the questions, but.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Aspila.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Armin, with respect to the builders, on the planning side of the house, we frequently hear from designers. We work with the designers, we work with the developers. We may not have as close ties with some of the people who are actually putting the, well, I'll make an analogy, putting the bricks on the ground, actually building the houses. So do you think the Chamber of Commerce would accurately cover everyone in that, in the construction sector in Georgian Bay? Or do you think we need to take a slightly different approach and perhaps work through you to identify the stakeholders in that group?
Thank you, Dr. Aspila. Certainly the Chamber of Commerce is not directly involved in the building activities of what's happening here. They've got their own focus on, fundraising for various community things and so forth. But I will, sorry, I was just getting a call. I let go there. I will take it upon myself to approach those who I've been consulting with in the past that were somewhat, in some cases, we're commiserating about problems that we're having with the bylaw and so forth. And so I will take it upon myself to send a bit of an invitation, or if it's appropriate, and if I may ask this, maybe you could send me and anybody else who is like-minded within the community that has a business or undertakes business activities serving the community, just sort of an explanation of this exercise that we're going through and why it's important for them to be involved. And that way, when we approach them, they'll know what it's about and so forth. But I'll certainly rally a few people that I know that have concerns.
Thank you, Armin. I think it would be very helpful for staff and for Jason. I want to make a quick comment as a follow-up to yours. We don't necessarily need to focus totally on associations or groups. We do need to remember that there are individuals who care about the Bay and who have economic interests and environmental interests and other things out there, and they might not be associated with a group. So, as we move through the waterfront policy review, I'm making the assumption that the consultation phase of it will also allow for individual opportunities there. I do want to hear from a couple others. I want to follow up on a comment that Jason made. When you talk about how wide you cast the net for consultations with stakeholders, I guess the challenge that I would put back to you and to Dr. Aspila is, when do you want to land this thing, and how wide is the scope on it? Because if you want a scope that's wider than the Bay itself, you'll go the route of the IJC and some of the other types of bodies to comment. And I'm not sure at the end of the day how that's going to help with what my understanding of the stated objective was this was a housekeeping exercise in the initial stages, clarifying policies, cleaning up some issues, dealing with some matters of consistency, and that could form a good foundation for moving forward with the need to update the official plan. So I would just say to both of you, please, as you go through this, think about scope and scale of where this is going, because it may be challenging to try and land it within a time frame that would be helpful to council if we if we start to get a little too wide. Dr. Aspila?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your points are very well taken, and they are very, very important points that need to be taken into consideration. And as Jason and I prepare the report that'll be going back to council to address item 2 of the resolution that triggered this entire process, we'll be advising on that. And there will be issues, as I said, an accompanying report with recommendations on the advisability of carrying such a study and associated timelines. And depending on the size and scope of the study, that's going to impact the cost of the study. And I know that's something that our council is very conscious of. And we'll be taking that into consideration amongst all of the other factors that have been and are continuing to be discussed today. And I am noting that we have about 20 minutes left, and other people may have commitments at 12 o'clock. So I encourage the discussion to move forward from here. Thanks.
Thank you, Doctor. I'll try and keep it. When you see me glance to the side, I'm looking at a clock too, so I'll try and keep us moving. I'd like to hear from some other folks if you've got other ideas or comments about this that might help Dr. Aspila or Jason. Is there anyone who wants to add to the mix of what's been said? All right. Well, I'm not seeing any. Oh, Armin's got a finger. You got a finger up. Okay. It's yours.
I was giving the others a chance. I just thought of a couple of other stakeholders that I think are important not to forget, and one of them being Georgian Bay Islands National Park. I know they were in attendance at some of the workshops that were held for the various zoning bylaw provisions for neighborhood plans and so forth, and I thought some of their input was very helpful. They're definitely a community partner, and especially a little bit more now than ever, likely with them being one of the stakeholders or one of the participants in the waterfront docking area near the Delawana Inn. And I think the OPP is also, remember we used to go to, many of you probably will remember with fondly going to the Delawana conferences many years ago under the direction of John Birnbaum and his associates. And I certainly miss those days. I thought that was probably one of the best political and socioeconomic collaborations of its time. And you got a chance to speak with everybody and get their opinions and so forth. Some of them were good opinions and others weren't agreed upon, but I think that is very important, and probably our First Nations within the community as well. That they should be certainly Moose Deer First Nation and the Wata Gibson First Nation. I think should be at least informed and given an opportunity to participate in some of these as they occupy quite a bit of land on the shoreline community. But definitely the OPP would be a good one, and probably M&R. Just so you at least loop them in on what we're doing. If they want to participate, they can. If not, that's fine too.
Okay, thanks, Armin. We've got some heads nodding on that. That's helpful. I want to go back to Beth to a point that Beth raised earlier that I don't think we've touched on yet, and it may be a yet to come thing that staff will work through. Beth, you were querying about timing and consultation. How do you contact and get the organizations involved when they've had different meetings and stuff? I wonder if you have any thoughts on that you'd like to share with Dr. Aspila.
Well, going forward, I think to be discussed, but just to understand the current process of communication is there's really 3 major newsletters that go out annually. There's only an annual meeting, which is held this past summer with COVID and not being able to meet. They didn't have their virtual meeting until August. And so there's limited opportunities to send association information out to say, this is a process you may want to get involved with and monitor. And for instance, we talked about the waterfront policy area review 2 months ago. 2 months have passed, and there hasn't been, to my awareness, any communication to the association representatives, i.e. the president, in terms of our communications director, to say, hey guys, this process is coming up. Maybe you want to get some information out to your association members to get engaged. So we've kind of missed a bit of a window even now for the spring, in my view. I realize there is a crunch and you want to have this done and some things tidied up before the election. But I am terribly concerned, as I'm sure are the other coastal associations, is how do you engage people when they are not preoccupied with cottage-related matters at this point in the year? And as I say, I'm different because I love the Bay. I'm here in the winter. I'm here all year. But most people shut it down in Thanksgiving and they forget about it until they're getting excited to go up and the ice is out. So mine was more a timing related issue. And the reason I raised it under the minutes is because the minutes seem to reflect that the committee generally agreed that, this was moving forward to a spring process of engagement, which I don't think was the resolution we agreed to as a whole.
Thank you for those comments. Can I ask you to respond, Dr. Aspila?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I was just looking for my unmute button there. So, fair points from Beth. We're going to be coming back with a report. We're aiming to bring that report to March Planning Council with the recommendations for how to proceed based on the information that we have. And one of those aspects is going to be communication. Now, for larger policy studies that I've done in the past, we've had budgets and we've had opportunity to use major media outlets. For example, advertising on the local Hockey Night in Canada broadcast that we're doing a major policy review. That might work great in some communities. I understand that we don't necessarily have a huge advertising budget for this study here, and that's reflective on the size of the community. So that's appreciated. What we will come back with in our report to council are some options for council that we could go down the road with for communication. And as I stated, depending on the size and scope and how detailed we want to reach out to individuals, there's going to be a cost associated with that. If we want to send mailings to everybody, there's going to be a cost. So that's to their addresses where they're located, the non-cottage season. There are other opportunities. Jason and I are going to evaluate those over the next week or so, maybe next 2 weeks, in advance of putting a report together. So I hope that helps to address. I'm not going to give a firm answer at this point, but it's on our radar.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I think the point Beth is raising is very well taken, and I don't think we have the answers yet. It's just a recognition that there will be a tremendous level of interest out there, but the timing is going to be something that we all need to think about and how we engage those folks. If for example, members of this committee need to get opinions or ideas back, or the communities need to get them back in, I'm just drawing a straw here, 30 days, 60 days, this is literally a phone call, email, work through our boards of director, try and find somebody in the winter to drum up some interest and get going on this. So, there's that all the way through to the formal type meetings that Beth mentioned, where some of us do have annual meetings and things like that. And I think, somewhere there's a meeting in the middle that lets this move forward quickly and efficiently, but we will certainly leave it up to you to try and make some thoughts known to council and help with that. Alan, did you have your hand up?
I did. I just wanted to continue my broken record position here. We have, what is it, 2,500 permanent residents and 16,000 or 16,500 seasonal residents. If we're trying to reach out and communicate with everybody, it's we don't know who these people are. We have no way to communicate with them today. That's a current challenge the township is trying to step up and deal with. And so the idea and the strategies that you've put on the table already of what are the groups that we can work with who can try to bring us input on these topics. That's, I think, the strategy we have to execute. But I think what Beth is really saying here is that there's a lot of these groups who don't today have a window of opportunity to interact with their community, and perhaps they could force a kind of a special mailer or a special communication. Don't know about that, but I think that's a challenge that we want to keep in the forefront of our concerns and how we're going to effectively get this input. And I'll shift to these other groups that Beth has started with a list of, and Armin's added a few. We can easily reach out to these other groups. We can get extremely valuable information. And I think that from a stepping forward process, we may actually get the 80-20 rule addressed by dealing with these other groups that we've talked about. And then kind of fill in the blanks later. But if we can get 80% of the interests and the values that we're trying to address for this study from the groups that we have listed, and perhaps a few other select people that are active in the community, I think that that goes a long way to setting us off in the right direction. And I would certainly encourage us to think that way.
Helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Beth?
Michael, Chair Williams, I'd just like to ask a question in terms of what is actually going to public consultation, because I hadn't realized that there had been a report taken to Planning Council on January 11th to define the terms of reference. And there was something in there that I queried, and maybe this is to either Jason or Dr. Aspila. It says here, page 7 of the report, short-term changes would be policy or regulatory changes that can be made to address immediate issues such as inconsistent policies, difference in definition, practice requirements. These housekeeping items will clarify existing requirements and not substantially change existing requirements. And it talks about the feedback, because we've talked about these a number of times. And these would be things like the definition of waterfront lot, navigable waterway, gross floor area, access to docks, lot coverage calculations, lifting of the hold provisions, clarification on that, and updates on policies relating to docks and PSW and FH1. Where I question it, it says, it goes on, the next bullet says long-term changes would be policy and regulatory changes that are more substantive in nature and may, I would think this should be will, but the report says may require additional investigation and consultation. So to me, it's even unclear. And to me, the way I read this, and maybe it wasn't intended to be the interpretation, is I read that there is no further consultation with any public group regarding the housekeeping items, which this committee as a whole has discussed a number of those, and they were high priority issues. So I would hope there'd be some further opportunity for dialogue on some of those smaller or short-term changes that we're talking about, because that's not the way I read this report, and I have to say it was a little concerning. So maybe we could have some clarity on that, if you don't mind.
Jason, you have your hand up, and I know Dr. Aspila wants to talk too. Jason, did you want to address this, or it was a previous item?
To be honest, I forgot what I had my hand up for earlier. Oh, I remember now. I remember. Thank you.
Sorry.
But let me sort of see if I can connect the two threads together. So going back to the cottage and the community associations, I really appreciate the points that are being raised, and I think in the work that Chris and I have to do next, it's also incumbent on us to do a little bit of outreach to understand what their business process looks like, because I would expect that council would have very similar questions for us when we bring our next report forward to council in terms of the study and how it's going to unfold and the feasibility of doing all of this work within the condensed period of time. So I think it's safe to say, I'm looking at Dr. Aspila to kind of support, but safe to say that I think message is heard, and we will follow up with that in the next couple of weeks. And then Beth, to respond to your concern, absolutely, public consultation will be part the review and the analysis of both the major and the minor pieces. And so what Dr. Aspila and I are thinking about, and what we've talked with council and this group about in the past is, planning committee has given us some really great feedback on the policies and the regulations, as has council and planning council. We have our own thoughts based on now almost 1 year of implementation experience working with the documents. We see the little fixes that we would love to be able to make on a day-to-day basis. We talked yesterday for half an hour about one zoning bylaw provision as an example, and what was the intent and how should it work, and let's make sure that we're consistently applying it. So we're going to bring all of those things together in sort of, if I could just describe it this way, right? Sort of collect all of that information. We'll be taking that out to the public, and we're going to be sort of saying, here's our perspective. What is your perspective? What have we missed? And then based on that, we'll then sort of begin to triage and sort of say, this is minor, this is major, and then proceed with the two streams of work that are envisioned within the terms of reference. So I would expect that at least initial round would occur, Beth, and then there would be a subsequent round of consultation after we put our heads to, okay, what needs to change? We're going to go test that with stakeholders and members of the public as well to ensure that we have their feedback before bringing it back to this table or bringing it back to planning council as well. So I'd look to Dr. Aspila to kind of support anything that I've just said. Hopefully I've gotten it correct, Dr. Aspila.
Oh yes, thank you, Jason. You got it correct. And even to further the discussion on this, before an official plan amendment or a zoning bylaw amendment is brought forward, that'll even provide a further round of opportunity for public consultation and for input from everybody on this.
But does it, Dr. Aspler, when it's the housekeeping, if you were just correcting minor things, typically that's not involving the public as a process? I guess it was the word housekeeping that was confusing me, and the word may, not, will have public consultation. And then there was a distinction about which ones would have public consultation and which wouldn't. That's all.
Point well taken, Beth.
And if I could, Mr. Chair, so on a housekeeping amendment, yes, we would hold a statutory meeting under the Planning Act in order to bring those changes forward. It is a legislative requirement. And then, Beth, I'll talk to the use of the word may. It's my style of writing, and I don't want to prejudge outcomes, which is why I use the word may versus will. So that's the rationale for that word being in the report the way that it is.
Thank you.
And to further, we still require planning, or we still require planning council's approval with respect to our upcoming report for this to go forward.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Now, I would say to you, Dr. Aspila and Jason, do you have the commentary and discussion from us as a committee that you need? Have your questions been answered? I'm sort of mindful of our time in the agenda, and I think we've probably said most of what we want to say to you anyway, but I'd like to hear, have you got what you need?
I believe we do so, Mr. Chair. I've been typing away, making notes. Right now they're a little rough. They'll be tidied up in the report that goes to council, planning council.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Jason, you're good? Okay. Committee members, that takes us through our item 5 topic of discussion. Appreciate everybody's input and involvement into it. Next up on the agenda is new business. I mentioned that I had one item I wish to share with you. And I will, I'll tell you what it is and maybe a path forward on it. I have written to the mayor and members of council, and I will read you what I wrote to them. Replanning committee membership. Dear Mr. Mayor and elected councillors, it is with a heavy heart that I regret to inform you I must resign from my position as chair and as a member of the township's volunteer planning committee. I am managing a personal health challenge which requires my full time and attention now, and I'm unable to continue on this committee. My resignation will be effective after our next meeting on January 28th, 2022. I have thoroughly enjoyed my time on the committee, and I want to express my thanks to you for providing me with the opportunity to participate in these important planning matters that have been referred to us over the years. It has been a great pleasure to work with staff and council members during my tenure on the committee. My very best wishes for a successful waterfront policy review, and I wish all of you well in the future. Thank you. I also want to tell you how much I enjoy working with all of you. I would be less than truthful if I didn't say that this has been one of the best volunteer experiences I've ever had in my life. I can't tell you how much I look forward to our conversations. I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed meeting all of you and becoming acquainted with you. It's absolutely been wonderful, and I want to thank all of you for the confidence that you've placed in me to let me bang a gavel or crack a whip when we've needed to try and get through a tough agenda. And you've educated me well and been wonderful colleagues. This is something I just can't continue with. I have a very real challenge that I have to deal with. And I will do that, and things will move on, and I wish you all the best. I have asked Dr. Aspila to consider, and the mayor will have to discuss with council, of course, what's going to happen with my position. I'm of the view that it would, doesn't matter now, I've resigned, but I'm of the view that it would be helpful to have somebody from out on the coast to be able to get up the coastal communities representation. And I know that time is short before the election. I want to thank you. It's been great. It's been wonderful. This has come out of the blue at me this fall, and I have to take this action. But I want to wish you well. I would link Dr. Aspila, Sydney, whoever's forming the next agenda, to put as the first topic on the agenda the election of a new chair for the February meeting, so that you can continue and move forward doing all the wonderful things that you've done during this time. So that is my that's my short new business, and I hope that the agenda will reflect that my request for election as you move forward with the February meeting. So thank you again. I think item number 7, I don't think, Sydney, we don't have any resolutions for committee of the whole, do we?
I did send you a resolution in the chat, just for your resignation. We do have to get a resolution for that.
Okay, all right, well, I've already sort of moved and seconded it, but I guess if we got to do that formally, I need a mover to, I don't know where that thing is. Can you read it for us, Cindy? What's it say, please?
It says, be it resolved, the planning committee accept the resignation of Michael Williams with regrets, and that planning committee recommend to council that the member be replaced.
Okay, thank you. Can I have a mover for that motion, please? Moved by Alan.
Give some discussion.
Pardon me, sorry.
I'd just like to say something on behalf of all of the members. And Michael, you mentioned before how long we've been working together and how much you've enjoyed the committee. And I feel the same. And I got to tell you, a lot of it's because of your amazing leadership. And you've done a really great job for us and for the community. And you're a wonderful individual. And I know I speak for everyone when I say we will pray for you. We support the challenge that you're recognize the challenge that you're against, and just want everything to go well for you, and you will be missed incredibly. So thank you for all you've done.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, we have a mover moved by Alan, seconded by Armin. All in favor? The motion is carried. Thank you. Now, Sydney, I think I got it. Resolutions for committee of the whole. There's none of them, right? Okay, 7's gone, 8. The last one that we have now is a motion in front of us Be it resolved that Planning Committee does now adjourn at 12:03, 12:05 p.m. until February 28th, 2022 at 10 a.m. or at the call of the chair. May I have a mover for the adjournment motion, please? Moved by Alan, seconded by Beth. Thank you very much. All in favor? Well, thank you, everyone. We are adjourned, and my very best wishes to all of you. And I'm sure that perhaps I hope our paths will cross in the future.